Hi crafty folks, Amy here with amyswares, and I have some shimmer powder goodness to share with you. This is a brand spanking new stencil. It's called Organic Doodles, and it is part of the March release at a Colorful Life Designs. I have this Arteza Premium Watercolor Pad. It's the 9 by 12 inch, and that's what I'm using. And I have the rough side facing up because I want the texture on this particular design. So I have sprayed some pixie spray on the back of this 6 by 9 stencil, and I am going to use a brayer to really kind of push it down into those fibers onto my watercolor paper because I'm going to be introducing a lot of water and it will warp. So make sure you get it pressed down well and make sure you get enough pixie spray on there, maybe a couple coats just to make sure it's down really well onto the paper for this technique. So I'm just pushing that down in there. It's a pro tip from Linnea Hollandoner. I've been doing it ever since I've seen her use her brayer like this. But here's examples of the cards that I'm making today. I'm going to be using this technique with these shimmer powders. These are called Nouveau shimmer powders, and they're kind of like a powder shimmery watercolor. So I have 3 colors here, and I end up adding on another one in a moment. But I'm going to use these 4 colors, and basically what you do is you tap little blobs of this onto the paper. Don't squeeze. If you squeeze, you're going to have a mess on your hands, but you just gently tap off little bits all throughout your design. So there's no real rhyme or reason here. I'm just kind of dropping little clumps of this shimmer powder all over the place. And I do use all 4 of those colors, and some of them, the 2 gray ones, the Meteor and the Lunar, have a bunch of additional colors of pigment within the powder. So you get a really neat effect here when you mix these colors together. And then, like I said, the 2 gray ones have a ton of other colors mixed in. They're just gorgeous. I can't get enough of this. I remember the first time I showed my friend Rachel one of these cards. She said, "What kind of sorcery is this?" Because it feels a bit like magic when you see this happen. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. But basically I just have a water bottle here, spray water bottle, and you start spritzing it. So you obviously need to use a type of paper that can hold some water, so likely a watercolor paper here. But look at that. I mean, once the water hits it, it's like it activates this powder and it's all sorts of shimmery goodness. So what you see I'm doing here, I don't quite have enough water down yet, but I'm kind of using a little tiny brush to kind of separate and get water mixed in with the little clumps. You don't want to leave a bunch of clumps of this powder around because it'll just kind of brush off. You really need the water to activate it, but there is a delicate balance. You don't want to overwater it because you don't want it to kind of, disengage the stencil from the paper and kind of get up under there. So there is a little bit of finesse and a little bit of work put into figuring out the right amount. But you can see here, I'm just kind of going in steps. I'm not dumping too much water on it. I'm kind of just determining as I go. And you may get some seepage underneath depending on how good of a seal you got. But honestly, with this type of messy design, it just kind of adds to the charm of the piece. So just kind of going through using that brush and then figuring out, I don't have enough dark right here, so I'm going to add a little bit more. And then, either use the brush or add more water if I need to. But all the while, when you use watercolor like this, especially a decent watercolor like this Arteza, it's really kind of soaking it in. So it may seem really wet, but it really is, doing its job and kind of sucking that pigment in the water in. So I'm just using a paper towel just to get a lot of the excess just around the edges, maybe dabbing a little bit. You can let it sit and probably not have to do this step, but I find that it works well for me, and then I don't have to sit there and wait very long for it to dry. So I gave it maybe a minute, and then you'll see I'm trying to lift that up. I was actually kind of poking it with my finger because it was so saturated, but look at this. Every time it gets me. It's like magic. So you get such clearly defined lines with the stencil when you do this technique. Then here's a Monoprint example. So you don't want to waste the pretty shimmer that's on there. So you kind of spray it with some more water and get another piece of watercolor paper. And then you can get the opposite look with just the residual, shimmer powder that was left on the stencil. So it's not the same sort of look, but it's different, and it still makes a gorgeous background, and you still have that shimmer. So here I come back. This is actually the next day I had let it dry. It doesn't take that long, but I just didn't get back to it until the next day. So you might notice an outfit change. But I'm coming at it with this Paper Rose rectangle stitch die. Excuse me. And these are, you know, meant to work with A2 size cards. So this will cut 2 panels out of each side. I'm only going to use the really bright, vibrant ones. I'm going to save that other panel for future cards. But I do cut 2 of these, and it gives it this nice finished stitched edge. And then I decide to come in with one of them here. I'm just kind of showing you how they lay out on an A2 size, so you have a nice little border. But I am going to use this 3D embossing folder from Altenew. It's called Mod Squares 3D, and I'm going to use that on one of the cards. Now, this watercolor paper is thick, and I know that it's not going to want to budge very well, so I decided to spray the back with some water. Now be really careful if you do this, because if you get any moisture on the front of the card, you're going to reactivate that pigment again. So I did get a little bit of wetness that somehow got to the front, but thankfully it didn't mess up my design. So if you want to do this, make sure you're careful not to get the water on the front of the panel. So here I'm showing you the reveal. It's not as dramatic as like a regular piece of cardstock, but it does add this awesome interest to the panel. So it kind of, you know, elevates it, pops it up, and really kind of brings out that shimmer, I think, when it is kind of showing it at different, you know, angles and levels. So you'll see there is some, you know, shimmer powder that did get left in my embossing folder, but have no fear. You just react. You know, it's water reactive, so you just spray it with some water and then you can just wipe it right out. I just used my stamp chamois to get it out. Now, that brings me to the next point about this. I have used these so many times, and I've never used a fixative, but I will say you might benefit from using a fixative. I don't know if it would kind of move the pigment around, but if you do rub your hand all over it, you are going to get a little bit of shimmer off. Or if you stack a bunch of panels on top of each other, then they might kind of contaminate another one. Now, I don't find it to be a huge deal, but it is something to consider. So here I just showed you the die. It's a, you know, it's got a shadow and the word friend. It's from Simon Says Stamp, and I use that and that kind of matte gold cardstock to create 2 of these beautiful sentiments. And I'm just picking some simple strips from Tailored Expressions to kind of accent as a sub-sentiment. And I decided to make one a birthday card and one kind of more a thank you card. I end up switching that celebrating with you to a thank you kind of theme. But back to the pigment. So it's optional. Like I said, I've never used a fixative, but I'm sure if you're really worried about it transferring, maybe put a little, you know, thin piece of copy paper on top of your card while you're mailing it. But honestly, I've never had a huge problem. I just kind of, you know, am mindful of it if I'm stacking up cards and things like that. But you do you. So just a disclaimer with that. But overall, I adore these shimmer powders. I have so much fun playing with them, and I just love the look you can get with these stencils. So here I'm just liquid gluing the friend down, and I'm kind of hanging onto this one, really pushing it for a minute, because there's a lot of that additional texture from that embossing folder, and it did want to warp again a little bit more because I did spray the back. So I'm really, you know, holding that one down until the glue really takes hold. And I have these little mini foam strips. They're kind of like Derice, but I actually found them on Amazon, and they sit a little lower profile so they don't sit off the card quite as high. And they're a really good price point. So I will link those with all the other products that I used in the video description box below. If you expand and scroll down, you'll find it. And there's also a coupon for a Colorful Life design. So this is just one of many amazing stencils from the March release at a Colorful Life design. So be sure to check out the rest, because there's some seriously cool stuff. And my coupon will get you 10% off of your complete order. So here's the first finished card. You can see with all that awesome texture. And then on this one, it's flat, but still has that wowza. And I added some gold blingage to kind of match the friend sentiment. And that's going to finish my cards today. So I hope you enjoyed these. If you did, please hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. And I appreciate you watching. I'll check you next time. Bye.